Good morning. Good morning and welcome to another of our Lockdown Learning free business continuity webinars. Today's webinar is on developing an exercise program and will be presented by Director of Training, Charlie McLean-Bristol. We will have a short Q&A section at the end of the session after all the content has been covered. If you'd like to ask Charlie any questions, you just need to type in the question box on the control panel to the right of your screen and we'll do our best to get through these. You'll receive a recording of the webinar later on today in case you missed any of the session. So I think we're ready to begin. So I shall hand you over to Charlie.
Good morning and welcome to today's session. I hope you can see. Right.
We're going to see your beautiful face today, Charlie.
Yes, we are, hopefully. Well, see my face anyway. Right, are those slides good to go?
I think the slides are good to go. I can't see your webcam, but maybe. Oh, yes, I can. If anyone can't see Charlie, they can drag him down from the top of the screen. You can drag him as big, or as small as you require. Right, I'll hand you over to Charlie.
Right, morning and welcome to today's webinar. And today we thought we'd do another COVID-free zone of developing an exercise program. So what we're going to do today is talk about what I think are exercise issues. So what are the difficulties in exercise? And I want to talk through that. I want to talk through the scope of exercise programs. So actually what you should be covering off in your exercise programs. Then I want to have a little look at, which is maybe something a little bit different from you, is how to verify your exercise and making sure that all the elements of your exercise program come together. And lastly, I want to give you some ideas and some ways that you can think about how you're going to demonstrate continual improvement and how you're going to demonstrate an improvement in your capability through your exercising here. And I think one of the reasons I put this on is the webinars is I believe quite strongly in the importance of exercise, and I think anyone in the business continuity business does. But I think what it is I think this is thing done in quite often not particularly well, and so I want to put some ideas for you out there of some ways of perhaps doing it differently. Right, one-off exercise issues. Just on the right there, that is, I just put some collateral up there. So that's something we used a little while ago from 2014, and we use that to try and make one of our exercises a bit more interesting. So that's a copy of the Scotsman, and we are talking there about an explosion. So that was the scenario. But what I see quite often, you see this quite often as a consultant, is that people come to us and say, right, we'd like a help with our annual exercise. Nothing wrong with having an annual exercise, but and often if you're regulated in any way, or maybe you're even part of a large organization, or you've even got your own procedures, is you've got to do an annual exercise. So the kind of exercise goes round this sort of idea, let's have an annual exercise, and kind of it's the BC managers, they take them out of, we've had this conversation before, where they take them out of the basement, they kind of see the light of day, and they're allowed up to go and visit the C-suite, go and visit the managing director, get the senior managers and say, this is my thoughts for the exercise for the year, and then they get to do their annual exercise. And often with senior managers, you're limited to 2 to 3 hours a year. So, we would love to have senior managers for more, but I think as business continuity people, sometimes we've got to accept that senior managers' time is limited, and if we get half a day a year, that's probably all we're going to get. So we're going to get limited years. And what I've seen with quite often is people who've organized this is what they do, because they've been sort of stroking their chin in the basement and thinking about this exercise, that they kind of come out with the most fiendish scenario and the cleverest scenario they could possibly come up with. And basically they come out with this clever scenario where they've kind of, oh, you know, they've never thought about this. If this goes down, it's going to cause chaos, and you know, this is a flaw in our business continuity. So what they do is they choose this most dastardly incident they can possibly find, and then they wrap the whole exercise round about that. So it leads with the scenario, and then everything else kind of follows on. And I think if you've read any sort of exercise guidance, the scenario ought to be the last thing you ought to be thinking about. You ought to be thinking your objectives, what's the exercise trying to achieve, what learning is it trying to instill in its participants, and then once you've agreed that, then you need to start having a look at what scenario would suit that. And having a devilishly fiendish scenario, to me, often an exercise is there's not a lot of point. If you can have a simple, your office is just burnt down. We don't need to know why the office is burnt down. We don't need to know how the office is burnt down. All we need to know, the office is burnt down, because often by the exercise, if you're doing kind of the initial response first 2 or 3 days, you don't know why the exercise is burnt down. So you kind of, and one of this idea of I'm getting away from the devilish fiendish scenario is if you give too much information to the scenario, the clever people in your team will work their way around about it. Well, if you just say the exercise, the building's just burnt down, then you know, there's no way they can. You don't get into this argument about, well, it wouldn't burn down because we've got sprinklers. Well, it has. So they do this exercise scenario. So often people try and go for the Simex type exercise because of the fact is that if you're going to have this annual exercise and you're going to involve the senior managers, you better make it all singing, all dancing, the most exciting exercise you can possibly do, because of the fact is that, you know, you want to almost provide entertainment. You also want to show off your exercise skills. And so by doing a Simex with telephone calls in and emails in, doing clippings light to the right and using all those sort of audio visual bits, you're trying to make it as exciting for the senior managers and sort of almost to show off your skills. So you're probably going for the most interactive type of exercise you're doing. And what I see from this is what happens in our exercise is we as human beings are pretty good at problem solving. Coronavirus, you can see, you know, some of the things that we've managed to achieve. Those responding have managed to ease a hospital in 14 days, you know, a major achievement. So we're good at problem solving. If we have to do something, we're pretty good at doing it. So I almost think that sometimes exercises turn into things like a glorified escape room, where you're given a problem and you as a team have to work out how to get out of that problem. So I think sometimes it's almost entertainment as opposed to learning. And, you know, kind of what are they actually learning? If they're learning that we're pretty good at problem solving, well, we know that already. So why are we putting our scenario exercise round about this? So I think one of the problems I see with a lot of exercise, this kind of idea of one-off exercise, is there's very little learning, or the learning doesn't actually say, well, actually, what do we need to know to manage an incident? What do we need to know to respond? And then let's run the exercise around learning that lessons. Sometimes you get into the argument of the validity of the exercise, the scenario, and whether it worked and whether it wouldn't work and whether it would happen like that. And so again, you need to, maybe this is a more general exercise point, is you need to frame the exercise in such a way that you don't get into an argument about it. Or even it's just sometimes the way you run the exercise that, you know, you make it clear that you're not tolerating any arguments about whether it's happened, because you can see in this COVID-19, and I said I wouldn't try and mention it too much, you see that nobody had this scenario planned for. Lots of people have pandemic plans, but nobody had the scenario planned for. And so, you're always going to have to, I would say the good Lord can produce far more interesting exercises than we can ever think of. And so, every exercise scenario is valid because things work in strange, mysterious ways. One of the other exercise problems we get in exercise, one-off exercise, is escapees. And I've had this quite often, more as a business continuity manager than as a consultant, because you're going to pay for a consultant to come in, you may as well make sure people turn up. But the CEO is turning up to the exercise, so all his or hers sort of incident team is turning up, and then what you find is the CEO suddenly gets busy that day, and the deputy or his deputy or her deputy is coming there, and then they kind of, people start to say, well, if he's not coming, why should I come? Or is he still coming, or is he not coming, or is she coming or not coming? And you end up with people, your sort of attendees melting away, because they're not, if the CEO's there, they're going to be there. But if the deputy CEO's there, they kind of say, well, I don't have to be there. And so people melt away. And so you kind of end up with a third 15 people, because they've got their deputies, because they're the only people who can't disappear away because their boss has told them to turn up. And also the issue of, it's a perennial problem, is you run an exercise, you put a lot of time and effort in it, but you can only exercise one team. And so you end up with kind of like the first 15 are always exercised because they like doing exercise, and the deputies never get their chance. And because the exercise takes an awful lot of resources and effort and maybe costs, then you never run it again. Limited aims and learning. I think it is, as I said before, people are not trying to say, what is our framework? What does our person in our crisis team or our tactical team or operation, what do they need to know? What skills do they need to have? Is that hard skills, soft skills? So, what is the learning objectives in this exercise? Because their exercises ought to be they're learning experience. They're not just there for a bit of fun. And so actually, what are people learning? And I think often it is, as well, is, we do our annual exercise because we're the business continuity people. The techies will go away and do a whole load of technical exercises. And because it's a very, very generalization, we don't really understand what they do and how they do it. They're busy trundling around and doing some recovery exercise, some DR exercises, and we're busy away doing our kind of team exercises, and we never really kind of bother to understand what they're doing, what they're trying to achieve, because it's all a bit complicated, and they seem to be doing what they're meant to be doing, so we'll kind of leave them to get on. And we don't bring those two things together so that we're understanding what they're validating, what we're validating, and what we're trying to achieve. So that is one of the sort of issues I see with sort of a lot of existing exercise. And this is when either you do or we get invited in to do sort of, yeah, Charlie, can you come and run our annual exercise for us? So what is the purpose of exercising? You've seen some of the good practice guidelines. Is one of the things, the purpose of all our business continuity, why we bother doing it rather than just make it up on the day, is we want to make sure that whatever responses we put into place would actually work. So, I often find people in business continuity don't talk about this idea of capability. Is what we're trying to do is all the time is increase our capability, increase our ability to manage and deal with an incident. And so as part of that, we can put lots of plans and we can put lots of sort of response scenarios, strategies or solutions, as the sort of latest GPT says. But how do we know they're going to work? And how do we know they're going to work from a technical point of view, as well as the humans who've got to manage it? So part of exercises is all about trying to get this capability better. So what I think the scope of an exercise program is that it needs to be progressive and it needs to be 3 to 5 years. I think anything shorter than that, I think, is just a one-off. And I think anything longer than that, depending slightly on your industry, but I think pretty much there are 5-year cycles of a lot of industries. A lot of industries will change. Some industries may keep fairly static, but I think in terms of personnel, in terms of what you need to achieve, I think sort of probably 5 years is about the longest you can do it. So you need a progressive program. And I think as the key word there is this kind of progressive. So we've got my little thing here. So a keyword there is that progressive, and it's trying to say, right, what we need to do is to improve this program over 3 to 5 years. I think it needs to include training, or it needs to be looked from a training point of view. And the fact is, what we're trying to say is, what do people need to know so that we can build that capability? And so that it doesn't not necessarily need to be training, doesn't necessarily need to be actually let's all sit down and look at some slides and I'll tell you how to do it. But it needs to make sure that if we're trying to teach somebody something, like we're trying to teach people how to run an instant team meeting effectively and how to get good actions out of doing that, you need to practice that, but you might want to kind of formalize the way this is run so that in such a way is that if you say that was one of the key things you want to teach them there, and you might tell them how to do it, and then in the exercise we've done a bit of teaching, want to practice it. If you don't structure your exercise in the right way, you might say, right, there's an exercise, it's a CEMEX, and you go away and do it. They might not do any actual team meetings because they kind of forget in the moment they're kind of running around trying to solve the problems, and they don't learn any instant team meetings because they don't really start and they don't really finish. They just have a sort of series of conversations. So in terms of if you want to practice your instant team meetings, one of the things you might want to do is to say, right, in this exercise will be over 3 phases. And I want you to, phase 1 might be look at the initial response, and then we'll stop, discuss the initial response, and then phase 2 is the first team meeting. So you try and play it live, but you are forcing them to sit down and have a team meeting in the way you want, with your agenda and the actions and all that sort of thing. So you're not sort of talking them through it because you've done the sort of the training bit, but the exercise is validating your training and checking they know how to do it. So that might not be for them as exciting as just having a kind of free run for 3 hours, but it actually makes sure that the right lessons is learned. We need to build a comprehensive program, and that's coming on to the next slide. So coming on to the next slide, and we need to make sure that our program of the team exercises is integrated with all the other parts of our response. And I think we need to build capability and to try and show improvement. Now, one of the things about decision-making in incidents is one of the key methodologies of decision-making is actually when you look at a situation, and I can't remember off the top of my head what it's called, but I'm sure someone on their chat will know it, is when you look at a situation, you recall the situation, saying, I've been in this situation before. I remember that I took this action last time and it wasn't very successful, so I'm going to take a different action. Or I did this last time, that really worked well, so I'm going to do the same action. So that's a kind of a recall decision-making model. Now, what you're trying to do in your exercise is build up this muscle memory so that you can, so you're trying to produce during your incident or during your exercise, you're trying to produce situations where close to real as possible. So if people then have to use your methodology in a real life, they can recall the decisions and exercise or methodologies and exercise which used and worked and ones which didn't work, so they don't make those mistakes again. And that can be turned into responses in terms of, yes, you want to get staff trained to make sure there is a certain level, which will come on to that. And also in building the capability, you need to make sure your lessons are learned and lessons identified, and then where they need improvements, they're followed through. I think also in your program, you need to take into account staff changes, so that as you get new people onto the team, and the CEO leaves and you get a new CEO, then you need to make sure that they have got a level of training. So you're always going to need to be building into your program this kind of it's like a fourth road bridge job, because you're always losing and gaining people. So how do you make sure those teams are doing? And you need to make sure that all your solutions are verified. So all the different ways of recovery and capability is verified. So just go on to the next slide. Right, come on, slides, behave. Right, sorry, just here. Where's my slide? There we are. Right, so these are the elements that I need to, let's get rid of that horrible line. It is. Right, so just let me check my notes here. Right, so this is from the GPG. These are what the things you should be exercising. And this is what I turn in terms of scope, is giving you a holistic view across all the different elements of your exercise. So there's a technical. So do all the required systems equipment work? So if you've got a system working there, so, can you recover something? But also technical is also like equipment works. So does your standby generators actually fire up when they're meant to fire up? Or have you actually tried them on load? As something like, I think it's a statistic that say that 50% of standby generators don't work when they're actually meant to. So procedures, have you got procedures for setting up things, moving there, doing things? So do all your procedures work? Do your process work? If you're going to your work area recovery, then does that actually work? Or if you're going, like as a lot of us are doing at the moment, are you working from home? Actually, does that work from home work? Or do they missing a VPN, or you're missing a token, or missing some way that it doesn't actually work? Do your processes work together in a logical way? So this is where you're putting together a number of different departments, processes, and actually does the sort of end-to-end recovery process work if you've got lots of different moving parts in there? Timeliness, can your RTOs actually be achieved? And so if you're going to your work area recovery and you say your RTO for your call center is 24 hours, do all the other elements, can the IT get there set up in time? Can you bus the people across? So can the actual timings that you decided to do they work? Are the process manageable? Do people understand them? Do they all work together there? Do you have the right personnel there? Do they have the right competency, skills, authority, experience? I always slightly struggle with this idea of personnel and a recovery, because the fact is, if you've got a kind of a senior management team who's your crisis team, and they might be, or some of them might be brilliant. The accountant might be fantastic at finance and all the kind of strategy and numbers and all that thing, but they might be hopeless at managing an incident. So if that person has not got their own self-awareness to say, look, I don't think I'm the right person for this team, I think my deputy, who's much better at doing this, and if they don't have that self-awareness and it's obvious to you that they're pretty hopeless, then do you take them out of the team? Can you tell them, can you tell the CEO that they haven't got the capabilities to do that? They haven't got the emotional intelligence there. So I kind of slightly work on the principle, and maybe it's a little bit of a cop-out, is say, look, if they decide that's a team, I'll work with the team and give themselves the best chance. But I would really say in an exercise, that person is not capable. You almost hope that actually those around them will kind of make that decision. But if it's the CEO, it's quite difficult. Resources, can you get the resources you want and need for the incident? And do you have all the right information there for that? So those are some of the things you might want to verify as part of your exercise. Now, you can build some of those things into an exercise, and you can say, right, you could put 2 or 3 of those things together, but sometimes things like your technical responses, does your standby generator work? That can be an exercise in its own right. And it may be a small exercise, it could be a short exercise, but it's still, you're trying to verify bits of the whole by doing that technical exercise. So that gives you those are taken actually from good practice guidelines, so you can read them, the good practice guidelines. But I think it gives you a little bit more of a framework of thinking through what are all the different elements of my exercise and what are the elements I want to put into. And as I say, you can put multiple of those elements into an exercise if you want, so that you can kind of cover off a number of them. Right, so this is an idea of an exercise program. So we have here our organization, which is a call center, which is going to a recovery site at our own recovery site. So this is the recovery site. Is what you're going to do is you're going to go from the call center and head office to the recovery site, which is one of your satellite offices, and the strategy there, or solution, is going to be replacing some of the existing people in the office. So the people from the call center are going to displace and use their PCs and their phones. So that's the strategy. And what I wanted to do with this, you can see the different exercises, is how you can validate the whole solution here in terms of a number of different exercises. And just the way this will be is, so there's going to be a shift of call center personnel from headquarters to the recovery site. You're also going to have to switch the phones, because the call center phones are pointed at the call center, so you need to switch them to the recovery site, but they can log on the existing PCs and they just get into their profile by logging on. So you can, in this organization, you can log on anywhere. So this is that's their solution. So let's look at how some of the ways you can validate the whole end-to-end solution. So the first exercise one is actually with the call center staff, and it's awareness training, and it's sort of short exercises so they have an understanding of what this solution is and how it's going to work. Because what you don't want them to on the day is, you've got your call center personnel, you lose your office, they're just about to go to the recovery site, and 5 or 6 and say, oh, I can't work there. No, I definitely can't work there because I've got childcare, I can't get public transport, I work on different shifts. So you have to make sure that people are aware of the actual people who are going to do it, the workers, if you could call them, are going to be aware of how they're going to work in a different way. So short awareness exercise, maybe you can have a sort of exercise talk through, may walk through of the exercises as part of new people's induction. You can talk to them about the BC exercise. We do this exercise called Outside Now, when you can either set off a real fire bell or set off an imaginary fire bell and take them outside in teams, and then you talk through how you're going to deal with the immediate response to the incident, and how you're going to deal with the first couple of hours, and then you can talk them through how they would move to recovery exercise. So at least once a year, a series of short exercises, doesn't need to be more than half an hour at the most, which is getting the employees there, the call center people, to be able to understand how would they move to recovery. So that's exercise 1. Exercise 2 is the incident management team. So this is the call center incident management team who are going to manage the recovery. So they need to do an exercise where they're gonna sort of practice managing from the initial response, from sort of hour 0 through to getting the recovery site up and going, getting the staff in there and making sure they're up and going. And if you're really good, you might look at some of the long-term impacts and issues associated with working in a different location for a long time, and how you're going to retain staff, and how you're going to make the decision when to go back, and how to look after people. So that's exercise 2. Exercise 3 is very simple exercise, could be 2 or 3 people from the call center going to recovery site, maybe every 6 months, maybe every 3 months, is going across the recovery site, finding a couple of spare PCs and checking they can log on. Because in the past, you know, if you've tried to log on other people's, try to log on a PC in another office, and it's fine, except for you can do it, but except it takes 14 hours to download your profile and download all your stuff onto the desktop. And by the time you've done that, you got bored and decided not to bother doing it. Or the software you have is not valid, so you don't get all the software because it needs to be actually held on the machine. And there's quite a lot of different reasons why you might not be able to log on. So what we do for our call center, send a couple of people over, they go over to their recover, just check they can access all the things. They might have a nice script to check they are, and there they are. They can check they can log on there. As I say, very simple, doesn't need, it can be a standard exercise, don't need a massive exercise instruction. All you need to do, quick exercise instruction, do every 3 months, and just make sure people do it. We might have our techie here, and that looks very much definitely like a he, and he might do the switch over the telephony. So they might do that out of hours, switching over the telephony, and they might get a couple of people from the call center, go to the recovery center and check they can receive calls, and they might get 3 or 4 people, might do it Saturday afternoon to practice calling into the number, because the number normally at the weekend is closed. So they open up the number and they practice making a few phone calls, and they can check they can receive it properly at the recovery center. Again, not a very complex exercise. It doesn't require lots of teams and stuff, limited amount of people. But what we're doing is we're checking that switchover can happen. And by checking that, you as the business continuity manager for the call center really can be assured that all the different elements of this put together are going to work. And then exercise 5, which you might do every so often, is moving everybody to the recovery site and doing all like a full dress rehearsal, where you're going to switch across the phones, you're going to switch across you're going to take the physical people from the call center to the recovery site, and you're actually going to practice the whole end-to-end process. So you might not want to do that very often, but again, you want to put all the bits together to check that all those kind of practice exercise 1 to 4 all work together. So that is what I talk about when and that's a very small bit of our exercise, our sort of recovery solutions, and it's just for the call center to cover there. But if you've seen, what I hope to try and make this point is to say what we're looking at is all the different elements and practicing all the elements together. Now, this is my program. So this could be a 3-year program. So you can see staff 1, you might discussion year 1, you might have a sort of slightly more exciting BC workshop where they do some sort of activities, might be a couple of hours tied in with the kind of annual call center away day. And then on year 3, they might just do some e-learning. So you're breaking up, giving them some different things, but you're making sure year on year they're learning. The call center plan, so year 1, they're having very something simple, build it up year 2, year 3, a full a full practice, making it really real and making sure that is going to work. And you can see some of the other exercise, and then the full recovery is the recovery center is you might do a full practice involving 50 staff. So making sure there's the bulk of numbers. Normally there might be 300 staff there, but with 50 you can simulate most of the issues you're going to have, and you practice that once every 3 years. So that's the idea of just this exercise program, validating all the different bits and also doing the checking as appropriate to the threat. So, you know, if your IT changes fairly often, then you have to check that more often. The telephony switch vis-a-vis the call center incident team. So that's the idea of an exercise program. What I want to do is move on to a little bit of, and I haven't seen very many people do this, and the other problem is slightly about this is there isn't an off-the-shelf. The Emergency Planning Society, and I know they're redoing it, did a little bit a while, some competencies of people managing incidents. But as far as I can see, I know the BCI is looking at competencies as well. As far as I can see, there isn't at the moment an off-the-shelf or recognized competencies of what, say, an incident team, the basic knowledge, if you have been designated the strategic team, the operational team, tactical team, of what the basic knowledge is. So this was my little bit sort of a first pass at it. So you can see up here, let me just give you a pointer there. So you can see up here, this is, pointer's not working. You can see up here is knowledge and tactical and operational. So this is more for operational teams, but you can see the basic is 1 to 7 of what the jobs, what they ought to be able to do. So more like learning outcomes. And I've done some intermediate ones for them. I haven't got quite as far as doing the advanced one. And then for our senior management strategic team, there's more down below, but I've just given you a flavor of it, is being able to what their knowledge is. And what you can start doing with this is you can start actually, you could send out an annual like Survey Monkey of going to say to the members of the team, say, look, this is what you're expected to know. Do you know it, or do you feel there's some knowledge? And then you can do some training, or you can put these as part of their as part of your exercise objectives or part of your exercise evaluations, and you can actually say, look, at the end of this essay, it was obviously you didn't understand, because you're a tactical team, you didn't really understand what the role of the crisis management team was, because you were trying to do some of their roles, and there was a whole load of activities which you tried to do, which actually would be done by them. So it's obviously you don't understand that, and you don't understand, and maybe there's a problem with the operational teams, is you didn't understand what they're doing. So with the sort of team competencies that you've got a kind of bit of a benchmark, And then what you can try and do is to say, once you've got your team up to the basic level, you think, I'm pretty sure that they know this stuff, then you can kind of go up to the intermediate and go up to the advanced level. And you can see for the senior management team is that you can start, and the question to number 2 there is, demonstrate an in-depth knowledge, number of specialist responses. So what you're saying, the people aspects there, is that they have a real good understanding now, because this is maybe the focus for this year's exercise program, is about sustaining people, looking at the people aspects and dealing with people, how you're going to do that, or crisis communication or administration support. So what you're trying to do is not try and teach them everything, because actually you're going to probably do it badly because you're spreading yourself so thin, is to actually have a basic immediate advance. And people kind of like that, to say, yeah, I'm comfortable with their basic. So you could have an evaluation of your team. You could do it at team member level and say, look, we got 5 on the basic level, but actually we got 3 at the intermediate and 2 at the advanced, because the 2 at the advanced have been here for 10 years. You run this program, lots of training, they've done lots of stuff, and so they're kind of au fait with this, whereas the 5 that are just at the basic have just joined the business. They're coming from an organization, didn't have lots of incident management, so at the basic level. So you can start actually looking at your teams, and you can start doing evaluation of actually where you're at. And so through your program, you can start looking at, how do we get the basic people up to the intermediate, and how do we get them up to advanced? So looking at the team competencies and looking at how you can improve, I think, is something you all ought to be thinking about. And how do you build that into your program? Sorry, I lost my slides. It's just this, my slides are having problems with actually advancing. There we are, there's a bit come back up. Right, the next one here is to have a look at your continual improvement. So how do you look at continual improvement to your team? Because I've often seen some business continuity teams, and you work with them 1 year, maybe they've just employed you to do one exercise and no sort of follow-up training, and then you go and see them the next year, and for whatever reason they're worse. And how do you kind of promote this continual improvement, and how do you make sure that actually they're getting better? So this was something we developed for a number of clients to kind of push them through and try and get their exercises to do some improvement. So the first thing is the incident skills demonstration. So what you do here, well, the team, what we've got is we've got 6 elements. I think that's 6, yeah, elements of a team. So we look at the team, we look at the plan, we look at their incident skills, their ability to identify interested parties and communicate, their use of plans and procedures to actually use them, and their ability to recover. So you can change those, but that's what we kind of use a little bit of the standard requirement. And this is more of a kind of like tactical operational team. And then what you can do is tell incident skills demonstration here. This is what we had. That's the question you can see. And then we had 4 different boxes. Then this is the umpire can then, and I like to try and have 2 or 3 different people. So maybe the exercise director can do it. And if you have a couple of umpires, you get the umpires to do it. And so they, during the exercise, will tick the relevant boxes to say of their incident skills demonstration. Also, what we kind of do sometimes with the team assessment and the plan assessment is get the whole team to self-assess them. So one of the issues is about leadership, and they can say, one of the questions could be, was the team well led? And then that's a sort of team assessment, and the umpires can assess that at the same time. And so that gives the opportunity to the team to say, did they think the team was well led? Did they feel that they were included in the they were kept informed? Did they feel part of the team? So we have the skills demonstration. We then can turn that into the thing on the left here, which we can then score them. So anything, I think everything above 3.5 and above is a green, and then anything lower than 2.5 is an orange, and so you can assess them. And what is the ability here is you can then start looking at the level achieved, and what you can also do is what I haven't showed you there, is the strengths and weaknesses of the team in that area. So as a team, the leadership was brilliant, but there was a whole load of people who felt different franchise because they weren't doing. So you can do strengths and improvements. And here you can end up with a nice radar chart of where they're at in those different levels. And once you've seen the different levels, then you got some strengths and weaknesses where areas you can improve. And then this is a real life one where actually this organization, you see the exercise of 2015, they're onto the exercise in 2016 had quite some dramatic improvements because they were able to take what do we need to focus on, and they had a really big team of 15 and it was chaos, and so they cut the team right the way down to about 8 people, and that gave the team members in their self-assessment felt that team size was much more effective. So this is a way of actually demonstrating continual improvement and actually showing that your team is getting better each time. So these sort of tools, they take a bit of work to set up, so we have one, but it's a little bit about actually thinking through, do we want to do this? But for me, if you want to show some continual improvement, if you want to show you're getting better, you need to have some way of proving it rather than, how do you assess an exercise and how do you assess the improvement? Because often the exercise points are about sort of, you need to improve the plan, or this is missing out the plan. It doesn't really give a sort of qualitative look at your exercises. The last bit I wanted to have a quick look at is just one of the things which is new almost to exercises is this idea of media and social media. And there is a number of this. This is a PlanB one called MITS, but there's a number of them out there. And what it is it's a secure portal where you can simulate the media and social media. So you can see here, there's some articles there which helps drive your exercise. So the idea of this is it adds a kind of slightly extra dimension to your exercise, because otherwise just keeping an eye on the time there, either some of the people, what can happen is if you don't have one of these social media simulators, the communication is one of the most critical bits of incident management. And if you don't have this simulator, then basically your PR, your comms people are going to be bored because they have nothing to. They can write a press statement, but you can't actually do anything with a press statement. So the idea of this is you can post the press statement there. You can post we can post news picture, and once they can put up their website, so they can put their press statement on their website, and then we can tweet. You can see this nice picture of a dog there. We can tweet. This was an exercise we ran for the Scottish resilience conference. So you can tweet. So once they put up the statement, we can tweet about the statement if we think the wording is wrong or it's inappropriate, or we can then start on Twitter putting out rumors to say 10 people died and they in the exercise know that there was one person injured. Then they have to counteract it. They might have to put out their own tweets to say this information is wrong, or put out a new press statement. So one of the things for your exercise programs is don't forget the media and social media bit. And there's a number of these simulators out there that can help you add that extra dimension to your exercise, and make sure you exercise the comms bit, because as I say, this is one of the most critical things that you'll do. So that is my sort of on exercise. So I think it is trying to avoid the one-off exercises and trying to have a look at the continuum of there. Have a look at your program as a whole and say, what is really critical that I know that works? And if it's critical to know that works, exercise it. And so running your standby generator under load for the weekend is as important as doing your kind of incident teams there. Look at how you're going to show yourself continual improvement. And just by doing an exercise every year doesn't necessarily mean you're getting any better, and it could be getting worse there. And think about the sort of media comms, making sure you get that into your exercises. So I've gone on long enough. Is there any questions there? So I'm just trying to get back to my questions. Right, sorry, let's see if we can get some questions down there. Right. How do you get CEOs buy into exercise? What are the key arguments to put? The problem is about CEOs, it's difficult that you can go for, if you don't watch that, if this goes badly, you're going to be sacked, because those who get sacked, you get cyber incidents, the CIO and the CEO, the two that get sacked. So most enlightened CEOs, I think, have to really realize they're doing it. I think there's an issue a little bit also about making sure that what you do is seen as quality and benefit. So that if you run an exercise, it's got to be good and it's got to be benefit, and that sometimes a little bit goes against my thing of say all singing, all dancing. And if you try and make it a bit more boring but a bit more learning quality, they might think, oh, this is not exciting as the last one. But I think you can cajole. I'm not sure you can bully, but I think you need to make sure that people are aware that they, the importance there. Sven, good to see you again. Yes, that's a good bit about outside now exercise. Just a bit of a plug here. I'm writing my book on short exercises, short business continuity exercises. So I the outside now exercises in there. So I don't know what the princely sum you're going to have to part with it for this very fine book. But if you want to learn to do outside exercise now, and as you can see from, or maybe not see there from Sven, that 10 years later they're still talking about it in Orkney. So there we are. Good to speak to you there. Let's do something like someone else. Did you say it's a portal to generate these media templates? In terms of the media templates, the way we do them actually is not particularly difficult. Is just take a screenshot, say like the BBC website, and what I do then is just then put a blank triangle or a white triangle over the existing text, and then just type on top of that text your own text. And I kind of try and match up the fonts and trying to match up a little bit the style of writing, but then you just put a box of your own text on top of the existing text, and that actually can look fairly authentic. You can do the same with the BBC website as well. So it's kind of is quite easy to do just with a bit of screenshotting and a little bit of ingenuity there. You can get I think you can get sort of fake Twitter sites and fake email sites, but last time I looked, I couldn't find them. Another question, could Charlie let us know which social media similarly recognized for a small person's company like me with limited budget? Our MIPS one is very reasonably priced, even for small companies. So speak to us on that. But yes, you can try and simulate it. You can try and simulate it with you can do. I've done Twitter with tweets on the wall and post-its, so you can do the sort of the physical bits. But do shop around. That there are lots of media simulators out there, so do shop around on that. Alistair, thank you very much for the webcast and being very informative. Good, I always like a good bit of feedback there. This mass, how do you determine an exercise success or a failure? I think that it goes ahead as a success. How often have you seen, oh, we'll just delay it. Oh, we've got a good reason right now to delay it. We'll delay it again. I think every exercise is a success. The only thing I could say if it's a failure, if it fails, breaks down in some way, and people walk out or they go away saying that was an utter waste of 3 hours of my life. So I think you need to, in terms of exercise, you need to do the quality, and you need to make sure you're quite, not brutal, but quite authoritative, because there's always the annoying person saying, oh, I wouldn't do it like that, or I'm questioning that, or you have to be quite authoritative with an exercise director, is to make sure that those people, or people who try and do silly voices, that sometimes on your own team, or make up silly names, then if it's felt a bit of a joke and not taken seriously, then it can be not a success. But I think as long as you run it reasonably, people will always learn. So I think there. Peter, what do you think of the approach of exercising part of a BC pyramid monthly or quarterly? You can exercise monthly. I think the problem is if you don't watch it, it's never happened to me yet because the people kind of don't exercise that often, but I think you can end up a little with exercise fatigue if you kind of did it exercise monthly, and or you run out of imagination of different scenarios and different ways to do it. So I think quarterly, but I think it but I think it's what is important there is to try and build it into my idea of a program, so that actually, if it is quarterly, even if it was monthly, I think you might run out of ideas. But if it's quarterly, it's not just, oh, what we're going to do this quarter, we haven't done that, let's do that. Is to try and spend a bit of time building it into the program. So the BCI says your plan should be exercised at least once a year. But maybe you stand by a generator or some of the IT things you actually want to do more often. Do you think COVID-19, this is Stephen, do you think COVID-19 will change the mentality of companies to mostly work or intuition because their current plans are just shell fillers? I think basically a little bit for the business continuity exercise industry. They might struggle to sell some exercises over the next year, because I think quite a lot of people might say, we survived that, and actually we weren't as bad as we thought we were. We learned quite a lot of skills just by trial and error along the way. So actually, oh, do we need to exercise? Well, we've done a real instance. Why do we need to exercise? I think that'll be a problem. I think what's interesting about the COVID-19 incident is that it's an exercise affecting everyone. And it's much easier to hide an exercise affecting everyone. And it's also much easier, at the time there, it's much easier when you're not in the spotlight and all the criticisms on you to manage the incident. So this is longer and deeper and probably different from everything else. from other exercises, I think you'll find that some of the lessons there will be different to the lessons learned for your teams if they had an incident where it's your office burned down and everybody else is fine. I think they'll also, people again will look at their plans. Lots of people have pandemic plans, but it's quite obvious a lot of people's pandemic plans, even the government's, didn't fit this scenario. And this sort of closed down, social isolating wasn't really part of anyone's plan, and nobody thought about it. So I think it will have a little bit of a re-examination of people's responses there. And Peter, I'll just read that out saying, great session, thanks. I think that's our time. Lachlan, are you there to end it off?
Yeah, that was really good. Thank you for that. No, it was good, and thank you for everyone that attended, listened in, and asked questions. As I mentioned earlier, you'll be receiving a recording of the webinar later on today, in case you missed out on any of the content covered. All the previous webinar recordings are also available via our website. Further information on our next webinars is due to be sent out very soon, so keep an eye out. Thank you again for joining us, and I hope you have a great weekend at home. Thank you.